Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back now to the ongoing series that we're doing on GSE and Ramp as part of the podcast shows. We've got two great guests here, one from the Netherlands, one from Brussels. So they've got some linguistic common ground, which would put me at a disadvantage, and I'm sure they'll maybe bring that up later on. But first and foremost, we've got Paul Drever, who's the GM, GSE Engineering and Standards Netherlands for Menzies. So Paul, thank you very much for joining us.
I'll just give you a clarification. I'm doing the whole network, Chris.
The whole network?
Yeah.
Beautiful. Okay. All right. Well, that's, I do apologise. I didn't mean to downgrade you. Thank you for correcting me. And also with that strong Dutch accent, it really put me in my place. So thank you.
I'll put that there. I've lived here most of my life, but I am British birth.
Yeah, no, I can tell by that. What part are you from? Where are you from?
Portsmouth.
Oh, blimey. Yeah. Portsmouth. Yeah. Very nice. Yeah, good outlet mall down there.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. All right. And our next guest joining Paul is Gerd Van Damme. And at this moment in time, we won't focus too much on the surname, but I'm sure it'll pop up a little bit later. Gerd is the Chief Asset Officer for TCR International and is based in Brussels in Belgium. Thank you very much, Gerd, for joining.
Thank you, Chris.
Really appreciate it. Oh, Gerd, you're looking serious there now. You're living up to the surname, my friend. Hey, good job. This is remote.
Yeah.
Right, lads, listen, first thing we're going to start with, obviously, and you're both seasoned professionals and you know how important safety is. So that goes without question. And it's one of the most important pillars of our industry. And I know how much you both care about it. So thanks very much for everything that you've been doing. And I'm sure, you know, under these recent times, you've been under an awful lot of pressure. So before we get into the general discussion, what I'd like each of you to do, please, is just very quickly give us a quick overview of what your responsibilities are and what challenges you've been facing over the last four months of this crisis. So if we can start with you, Paul, that'd be great.
My responsibilities mainly are to make sure the equipment we purchase is of the correct standards, has all the options we require. I also look after the preventive maintenance schedules that we use. In general, anything technical to do with Menzies. I also do investigations of any incidents or accidents that may have happened on the safety front side of things. So in general, I'm the go-to person for anything technical required within Menzies.
Okay, very good, very good. Obviously, I know quite a few of the Menzies guys because a lot of them used to work with me when I was working with Lufthansa.
Okay.
So Bob, Big Bob.
Bob Newman, he's retired now. He's probably living somewhere, a life of luxury in the sun somewhere.
Yeah, good on him. Hey, what a lovely, lovely man. Really enjoyed my time with him.
Good man, Bob.
Tremendous fella. Very practical and down to earth.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. And Gerd, over to yourself. So as soon as you finish the acting career.
I'm responsible with the team for the whole life of assets within TCR. As you know, we are an operational leasing company with customers being handlers such as Menzies, airlines, airports. And for us, it's absolutely adamant that we look at the total cost of ownership of ground support equipment. So with the team, we take care of procurement, specifications, procurement of that GSE. Got 33,000 assets on our books worldwide. We also look at preserving that total benefit of rental, I would say, within TCR, making sure that we maximize the asset value, being able to give good pricing to our customers, and then also deciding at the moment that an equipment comes out of a rental contract, what to do with it. Should we refurbish it? Should we sell it? Should we put it back in rental? And the sales and the scrap of that equipment is also a responsibility of my team.
Okay, so we've got both sides of the same. We've got both sides of the same sector here, so that's really good. Now, what I'd like to start with from both of you, and we'll start with you, Paul, is obviously a just culture and openness, and you know the DNA of an organisation is so important, especially with reporting any issues to do with equipment or incidents or accidents or damage, etc. How How have you found that to be over the last 4 or 5 months now, where, where operators have been on furlough, they've come back, all of a sudden they're having to do things faster and quicker because they have to ramp up, and, they worries and anxieties. How has that impacted on your side over the last 4 or 5 months?
We have seen that. Obviously, there are, because of the furlough situation, unfortunately, some redundancies have taken place, which is not very nice for anybody. So, of course, all that plays on anybody's mind when they come back to work to do anything. And human resources have been involved in this. We have recognised this as a problem. And what we are trying to say to the staff is, don't rush, do your normal job as you did before, because the last thing you want is an accident to happen when somebody's under you could say under duress. So we do try and relieve that duress by saying, please operate as normal, do your job normal. If you do have any issues or you do not feel right, please come to us. There are many memos being sent out by Menzies to contact human resources when necessary. We have all sorts of regulations in place now because of the COVID, of course. There are sterilisation. There's everything available to try and avoid any kind of abnormal contact, you could say. But yes, we do realise that, and what we have said to our staff is, please don't rush, don't hurry, do your job as normal. If you feel that the aircraft may be delayed, please let your station manager know or your direct leader, and we will come back on that. But we do not want them to be under duress or any kind of stress whatsoever because of the situation. No, we are trying to avoid that at all costs.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, good. That's what I would have expected. Thanks very much. Now, Gerd, with regards to your provision to companies when they lease equipment, to make sure that that equipment is managed as effectively as possible, do you have like a code of practice or a code of conduct that is followed up by yourselves to ensure that they're doing as much as they can so that either the value of the asset at the end of the term is of a decent value, but also so it's not having to go through as many repairs or damage?
Well, first of all, let me start by saying that our operational lease formula is all included except for damages, which doesn't mean that we don't care about it. It's a nuisance in any workshop to have damaged equipment coming in. We're probably losing money on it because it's always not predictable, and as such, it creates stress in the workshop. But hence we try to help customers in reducing the damage. And for instance, with Paul, with Menzies, we've tried very hard to set up good reporting to understand together where do we have the most damage. Can we adapt anything to equipment, to the options to reduce the damage? It's very much a quite local thing, because any customer of ours will have more damage in one station than in another for all good reasons. Maybe infrastructure, maybe training, maybe a lot of new people coming on board all of a sudden because of a win of a contract. So there we try to adapt to the local situation and get into a local communication with our customers, making sure that we all work together to reduce damage.
With that damage and the different types, and you alluded there to different locations, it could be infrastructure, it could be training, etc. Do you keep a database of all of that type of reasons for damage, etc.?
We do, as we track everything we do on equipment in our system. So every spare part that goes on a piece of equipment, any hour worked by a mechanic is being put on that equipment. So we have a follow-up per equipment, per asset, over the entire life of that asset, which means that we can draw very good data and do analysis on it. In terms of damage, it's still pretty much a manual process. So it's time consuming from our people to come up with good reports. So we do it more on a when needed basis. If a customer has a certain issue in a certain station, we can work together, go through all of that data, because there's a lot of manual input in there, and you have to go through, and it's in local language, because the mechanics, they do write down things in their local language. So it's there's a bit of manual work there, but we could extract anything from the system as we keep a history of everything we do on that equipment.
And can I ask you, is that data also then shared with IATA and their database?
No, no, we do not share that at the moment. We've never had a request from IATA, so no, that's not something that we do.
Okay. And Paul, when you record, all your incidents, etc., and obviously with your SPIs, do you keep a record of all of the, the cause of the root cause analysis of those?
Absolutely. We have a system that controls that. Any kind of incident is reported into the system. It is followed up. We have different categories of incidents and accidents, of course. There's personal injuries, aircraft damage, just general damage on the airport. There are a number of categories, and yes, we do follow up. Any incident is recorded and reported, and on the level of how serious that incident is, how far we would take that investigation. Obviously, if somebody drives into a post with something, we're not going to do a massive investigation on that. But on the other side, if there's aircraft damage or any kind of serious personal injury, touch wood, then we will definitely be following. And it gets a full investigation to the very marrow of the investigation. We go all the way. Yeah.
Okay. Very, very good.
We find that very important.
Okay.
Yeah, we've been asked to help on that. So those reports are being shared with us if one of our equipment is involved, and we try to help from our side of the equation as the maintenance being done properly, et cetera, et cetera.
Oh, okay. Okay. Now that's good. A good segue there into maintenance. Gerd. So with the maintenance and the preventive maintenance program, with the practical sizing that's taken place now with airlines and the reduction in services and even more of a reduction over the next 4 to 5 months, do you reevaluate the guidelines with regards to preventive maintenance and the maintenance program?
Well, under normal circumstances, pre-COVID, we would typically continue preventive maintenance on assets which are not rented to make sure that they are ready to be put in rent the next day. Obviously, the last couple of months, we had to stop doing that as we had an enormous amount of equipment standing on our parking lots. We do have, with a lot of customers, we have possibilities that they can, what we call mothball equipment. So basically, they're not paying for it or at a very reduced fee. So all of that equipment is standing there and just continuing doing maintenance on it while we don't know when they would go back in operations wouldn't have made a lot of sense. It would have just cost us unnecessary money. So yeah, we because of the special situation, we did stop preventive maintenance, but we keep on talking with customers on a daily basis to make sure that we know when it's going back in operation. We do the maintenance, we do a C or a D check to make sure that it's absolutely safe to use, and then it goes back into operations.
Okay, all right, very good. And on the subject of now, obviously there's an excess of equipment available. Paul, do you think it makes sense now in certain airports where there's several GHAs that they start to pool equipment and have some guidelines as to the optimization and effectiveness and also location of the equipment?
Yeah, pooling has been running on and off for the last few years. We have obviously in Luton, we have a full pooling with TCR. There are a number of different players on the field now with pooling, but it can get complicated because your specifications may not suit the other person's.
Yeah.
And your equipment requirements, for instance, may not suit theirs. So you do have a lot of pre-leg work, you could call it, before you even get to the stage of pooling. And then you just talking about damage. Another question is how you're going to record the damage when it's pooled equipment. So of course you have to fit telematics.
Yeah.
You have to know who was the last user, and hopefully that gets followed up on. So we do see pooling as it can be an asset, but it can also be a non-asset, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So we are definitely looking at that. But of course, when it comes to environmental impacts and the airport, it's a good thing because you're reducing the amount of equipment that's actually standing on the airport. Yeah. But as on the cost-saving side of it, we're not too sure about that yet, even though we have run a few poolings, especially in Luton. We've run that now for, must be 3-4 years, Gerd, now?
Yeah, something like that, 2.5 years, I believe.
Yeah. And we have looked at another, and a lot of the airports are trying to push it, but may not be quite so successful to get all the parties to agree in the first instance about how to take the step forward to do pooling. Yeah.
Okay. And Gerd, with regards to pooling and whether or not there's an option there, are you looking at certain telematics and certain, digitized programs that can support various forecasting, location, order of use, etc., and then linking that to people as well? So I'm thinking that, and just off the top of my head, airports maybe will be able to take a more leading role in the future for looking after their own ecosystem and making sure that certain things are in place. So, if they were to also support equipment pooling and personnel allocation, not the entire personnel, but let's say generalists who have been multitasked, uptasked, or new tasked, do you think there's an opportunity there to partner up with airports to see how that sort of a model could progress?
Yeah, absolutely. And we do have a telematics solution. We work together with two partners, one being Targa, which is an Italian company which is very, very big in the automotive, so that they can scale up for all motorized equipment, where we look typically at location, at idle time, at battery levels, at access control, very important in a pooling scenario to know whom has been using it the last, and whether people are allowed to drive a certain type of GSE. They have to be trained on a pushback to be able to drive that pushback. And then we have another partnership with Sensolus, which is a Belgian company, which has developed together with us a solution for non-motorized equipment, which is more about the location and making sure you find back that odd dolly, which is somewhere behind the warehouse or something. To come back a little bit on pooling, well, it's not new, as Paul was mentioning. We've been doing the cargo pooling in Heathrow for the last, I believe, 11 or 12 years. We've done in Düsseldorf Airport in Oslo, we've done pooling for 5, 6, 7 years on non-motorized equipment. Obviously, we're working together with Menzies and colleagues of Menzies in Luton, and there have been other discussions. And it depends on what you want to get out of it. We do not believe that there's a one-size-fits-all. The same for our rental companies, for our rental contracts. Every situation is different. Every customer is different. If you want to take equipment out, then you'll have to really pool, which is the case for the cargo pooling, because you don't have everyone has different peaks in the operations. Or for the non-motorized. In Luton, we went for an entirely different type of pooling, which is gate positioning, where it was not to reduce the number of equipment, it was to make sure that the on-time performance was improved, that you had less equipment driving around, reducing the risk of accidents on the apron. So there was a completely different mindset from the airport and a different objective to go to pooling. Having said that, and I do agree with Paul, can be an asset, it can not be an asset. In the short term, you could argue that for TCR it's not that interesting because it's less equipment we could rent. However, we always think on the long term with our customers, so that's not the way that we react to it, and we're very much in favor looking into pooling projects everywhere in the world. It's not easy, however. When we see in Luton, it's been a bit of I wouldn't say a nightmare, but a headache to say the least. Just setting that up, making sure that everything is running smoothly. I do understand airports that want to introduce that, maybe now today more than ever. However, you need a very good independent partner to manage that pool of equipment. I would be in favor of it being TCR, but I mean, you do need an independent player in between the handlers, because otherwise you would get chaos probably. I don't know, Paul, what you think of that, but that's our experience at least.
Yeah, well, I have found that in quite a number of cases of pooling, the actual airport wants to actually take the equipment over and rent it out to the users. Now, that's all fine, but then you may end up with a situation where the airport is going to choose for you what you should use, and that will go down to telematics, even to that level, and that may start what we could call a cat fight. We don't want to use that while the others do, and you may end up with having just as much equipment as you had anyway, because they want to have so many stairs at the gate. And some of the issues with pooling is, for instance, pushbacks. Now, if you get a delay on a flight and handler A has got a delay for 30 minutes, he's not going to release that pushback to handler B, who may want to require it in 15 minutes time. Yeah. So you've got a few issues just like that. So they'll either have to have a number of reserve pieces of equipment as backup. So, and then of course the people in the pooling end up paying for that, even the reserves. So you have to wonder, is the pooling viable against actually purchasing it and doing it yourself? Yeah. Because by the time they finished up with reserve equipment, telematics, more stairs required at the gates, etc., it can end up to be quite an expensive project. At the moment, there's a major airport who is trying to push pooling. Unfortunately, it's got stopped because of the COVID, but yeah. This was a good example. Every time we went back to the meeting, the costs increased. Yeah. So, it can be, it takes a lot of work to actually set up a complete 100% pooling.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not quite sure if that's really ever happened yet, a complete 100%, where everybody's got the use of pushback, stairs, air conditioners, whatever you like to, whatever on the airport. It's not quite got to that level yet.
Yeah, I think in my or as much as I know anyhow, it hasn't. But now with this crisis, it's putting more emphasis on telematics, digitization, AI, etc. Perhaps it's something that will have to come as people start looking at the risks and business continuity and sustainability. So, it's something.
Absolutely. We have had telematics now for a few years in quite a number of stations. We got to the level of refusing access if people weren't trained on that piece of equipment. He'd swipe it and it wouldn't let him access it because he wasn't trained on it. But that's hard to keep up because human resources with change of staff, training levels, it's quite a lot of work just to get that data correct for access. We do find that management of telematics at stations can be not quite what you want. Yeah. Somebody has to manage the telematics. Yeah. If somebody has to see, we got to hear an incident has happened and it happened on 8 o'clock last night and this was the incident. That may not always happen. Yeah. Exactly. And overriding systems, it's not quite there yet with the telematics either. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree. Like with most things, it's being pushed and rushed. But I think, one day if they do it right and get the right people involved.
A good example there was, Gert mentioned about rolling stock, tracking and tracing. Now there's all sorts of suppliers saying, we got these batteries, they last 5 years, etc., etc. Excuse me, but that's not true.
Yeah.
I can assure you, it depends how far away it is, how many times you let it go off through the 24 hours, how many pulses, etc. In our experience, no chance. You'd be lucky to get a year or 18 months out of it. So you might end up at a large operation chasing $500 or $600 around just changing batteries.
Yeah. By the way, I don't. You've got these people saying 6, 7, 8 years, just spending a lot of money on batteries in there. It's not necessary because, well, at least for TCR, we maintain that rolling stock as well. It comes in once a year at least, so you can change the battery. It's not difficult. So we've got batteries that keep 2 years, and they do keep 2 years, but that's sufficient, I believe.
Yeah. On that and the point that you made there, Paul, with regards to how to manage and the level of management, etc. Just something for you both, and Gerd, if you can just give me your first impressions with regards to training. Okay, now we all know how important training is, and repeat training and competency testing, etc. But now I think more than ever, there's a new approach to leadership training and understanding how to treat people, how to involve people, how to tell people why they have to do something rather than what, where, and when. Is that something now that's being looked at? Because obviously with cash flow and with looking after your costs, people don't want to be entering into a major training exercise. But I think the time now is right to start to look at a different type of leadership. So letting people know why they need to have leaders, letting leaders know why they need to lead, and knowing what is important as the elements of leadership. How do you feel on that?
I totally agree with you, Chris. And actually, we're on Friday. We have our test case on a leadership program that we would like to roll out all over the world. So we are investing a bit of money in that. We're trying to keep it efficient. Last couple of years, we focused mainly on training our mechanics, so they are absolutely top notch.
Yeah.
And we focused a lot on safety, making sure that safety behavior with our leaders, with all of our colleagues, is absolutely working well. That it's on the top of their mind. But now we want to extend that a little bit more to leadership, and I do agree, and especially with COVID and with furlough, we've had a lot of people that were at home, and we need to bring them back. I mean, there were not a lot of physical accidents, obviously, because the workshops were closed, but the mental state of people is maybe even more important, and making sure they do not go and do unsafe things in the future. You have to make sure that they are focused and that they know why it's important to be focused and what we expect from them. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, 100%. And also with regards to furlough, redundancies, losing a lot of experience, some guys who weren't in leadership roles but were very good at their technical role or their safety role, when they step up, if they're not given that guideline, that coaching, then you actually lose out in both ways. You lose a good safety or a technical expert, and you haven't got a great leader, and then you haven't got a good leader, and you're losing out on the other side. So it's
yeah, I agree. And one of the things that we're doing is not doing that. Why would you take your best mechanic and make them a supervisor? I mean, people can have a career and be a leader by being just good in an expert role. And that's what we're looking at. You might have someone who is a bit less experienced, but who is a great people manager. You would rather have that person as a supervisor because they're good at planning and they're good at managing people, and make sure that you also have a horizontal way that people can grow into an expert role, and make sure that maintenance is done in the best possible way, and that troubleshooting is done in the fastest way possible, so we can get that equipment back on the apron as fast as possible.
Yeah, so they almost like a peer verifier from
Absolutely.
as to what their colleagues are doing, which then gets fed into the leadership data to help them make decisions.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and Paul, from your side?
Yeah, the same. By Menzies, training is a perpetual motion. It never ends. We change. We learn from previous experiences, so we may change our leadership, the way we will approach leadership. On the point now of promoting people from a certain position, especially from the workshops, where I'll be straight with you, finding a decent GSE mechanic is gold dust nowadays. It's very hard to find a standard mechanic who's working in a workshop on cars or vans, let alone anybody with experience with GSE. That's a task. Not that you want to keep the person down at a certain level. You must realise, of course, that you can't just say, "Oh, you're going to be a mechanic for the rest of your life," because we can't find mechanics.
Exactly.
Yeah, either. So that's all taken into consideration. But training is something, especially when you, in the aviation industry, you may end up with certain stations that have quite high staff turnover in certain regions, and keeping that ball rolling, it can be quite a challenge. Even to the basics of induction training. There, nobody works for Menzies without the standard induction training. That's always given. And then we'll start by categories of what we think that person is capable of. Yeah, is he capable to drive a pushback?
Yeah.
You take him on for training, because when you start taking people on for training, obviously there's an expense to that as well. You don't want to be wasting his time, or that person's time, or the company's time. So you have to make sure getting the right choices based on feedback from the station, appraisals, etc. That's the way we are doing it. But training is a very important factor for us in Menzies. It's never ending. Yeah. Yeah,
no, 100%. And that's the way it should be. Yeah. Can I ask you something now, both of you, and I'll just start with you, Gerd. Gerd, you're obviously experts in providing equipment, etc. Have you ever thought now of doing an apprenticeship type role where you have a reservoir of specialist mechanics or whatever that can actually go to stations or go to some of your customers if there's a shortfall for a temporary period or just a interim, so that they can actually maintain the levels that are supporting your own equipment, but also give people an international flavour of what's going on in the areas that you supply equipment?
We do. We've always done that. And for a lot of people, it's actually a very positive point because they can see other parts of the world. Yeah. If we do a startup somewhere, we always send people from all around the business and go and give a hand. and usually it's more experienced people, because you need to have experienced people while doing a startup to make sure it goes as smoothly as possible. We've even thought of setting up a team that would work on that. Well, it's a bit difficult to actually attribute people to that, because you would take them away. You would take good mechanics away from a normal operation for a business where you don't know if they will be needed in the next period of time. But we always help out each other. Every country helps out. If we do a call out to all of the regional or the local managers, they're always more than happy to send people over and making sure that things run smoothly and that they help their colleagues.
That's good. That's good. And Paul?
Yeah, we do the same where we have our own workshops. So I myself have been on many countries just to, let's call it, do a startup on the GSE, make sure we've got some kind of workshop facility. The guys in place are trained or will be trained on GSE. That sort of stuff. I go there, make sure we have certain facilities in place, and sending out mechanics. We haven't got too many in Menzies. In the States, we have quite a lot of workshops, and they do integrate. One team may go to another to support them because of skill levels on GSE. It's not just working on a automobile when you plug in the laptop. It's a little bit different from that, and that's what you have nowadays. When you take your car to the garage, he plugs it in, and it tells him what's wrong. With GSE,
white gloves on.
yeah. And they don't repair anymore. They just replace. Yeah. And, I have to be careful what I say now. And but with the GSE, you're actually still probably physically still actually fixing it. And there are obviously now GSE out there where you can plug it in. But it's not the same as the automobile world, no.
Yeah.
Maybe an additional thing that we've done during COVID, for instance, in one of our largest workshops is in Amsterdam. We actually worked in 2 shifts, 1 week on, 1 week off, to make sure if we had an outbreak in one of the teams, someone would get sick, then at least we would have another team ready to still support our customers. And there were even between countries, for instance, in Amsterdam, they had an agreement with the team in Brussels that if anything would go wrong, for instance, in the Brussels team, someone would get infected, that at least there could be people coming over from Amsterdam to Brussels and continue our operations.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think risk assessment now and mitigation is so important, more important than most companies ever thought before. So anybody that's in QHSS&E, they're all of a sudden, they've been elevated in stature and importance and recognition. So it's not a bad thing. Now, with that in mind, are you also finding now that you're having to, or you're considering as part of your strategy or tactics, to store a lot more parts just in case? Because instead of the old just-in-time principle, I think people are now moving towards a just-in-case, and storages are always getting bigger.
In Menzies' case, we have probably 40% of our equipment at the moment is in the mothball status. Yeah. So, and then you should have enough parts still, which you're not using, because we defer on the preventive maintenance so that we have what we call a back in service check sheet.
Yeah.
Which means anything going back in service after 3 months must follow that up, and then it goes back to its preventive maintenance. But investing in spare parts, again, is an investment that might not be quite at the right time, if you understand what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
So we do have most of our spare parts are on the shelf ready to go, but investing in even more spare parts while the equipment is standing there not really doing anything is a difficult decision to make.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, it's all relative. But like I say, some people I shouldn't say that. There are examples of where parties have let it go right down to the knuckle, and they haven't had that level of backup linked to the preventive maintenance and the trends.
Yeah, what we have done, we've made. I actually done it together a little bit with TCR. We made a COVID-19 check sheet. And one of the questions on that check sheet is, are your spare parts available and up to standard? Another question is, do you have enough mechanics on site? Because that's another problem, of course. And is there enough staff to actually service the equipment, let alone check it? We do the weekly checks even on the equipment when it's standing still.
Yeah.
Somebody goes there with a checklist and make sure that equipment is ready to go. So the last thing you want is to leave it there to stand in there for, let's say, 6 months, for instance. Yeah. And then don't even look at it and go there and jump in it and drive away with it if it's possible. That's the last thing you want. So we avoid that at all costs.
Yeah, and obviously in some environments with temperature extremes, there's certain things you have to do to make sure it's not going to cause problems when you do need to use it.
Well, yeah, your water units, etc.
Yeah.
We've got that covered also in the check, and also when you put the water wagon back in service, make sure you follow the AHM 440 to make sure you get it serviced correctly. Don't just put it in there with the water. It might have been in there for 6 months.
Exactly.
But but we do ask them to drain it, everything. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, good. Now, one area, obviously, talking about the AHM, Chapter 10 environment, how much emphasis generally do you think is being addressed with regards to those environment issues, whether it be from engine idling or using the nearest equipment or, just anything to do, and equally, some of the areas that you guys have spoken about now with, modernising the fleets, etc., using different types of equipment, the types of maintenance programs. How much of a change are you seeing in that environmental focus now, and even to the point of looking at electric equipment?
Oh yeah, the last one is very important. Probably now 80% of the equipment produced in GSE you can get in an electric form, except obviously where it's not possible. When you're talking about major main deck loaders, etc.
Yeah,
air starters, it gets a little bit more difficult. I'm talking about aircraft that still use air starters.
Yeah.
And, so we push one of the first questions we always ask the stations when they request new equipment is can you use electric equipment? That is first one of the, because we want to go to electric. Unfortunately, many of the airports, the infrastructure is still not supporting it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now, in Scandinavia, I'll have to say that the airports are quite on the ball there, and they are supporting it. And here also in Holland as well.
Yeah.
But when you start to go to other regions like the USA, it's not quite anywhere near what you want, And unfortunately, some of the airports, they don't have enough electricity themselves to even give you more. They have to end up building a new transformer, for instance, or getting more power. So it's not just a case of charge points. It's a case of, can the airport actually give you that power to you?
Exactly.
And this is becoming an issue because most of the GSE suppliers can supply equipment which you can use on the airport quite successfully. And we know that already. But the infrastructure support is a long way to go. And unfortunately, in the States, the airports belong to the cities, and then some of the investment may not be get the same as what we would see in Europe. So, infrastructure still remains a problem. Then they start talking about hydrogen. We don't want hydrogen stations on airports, And so I feel personally, electric equipment is the way to go. But they talk about hybrid. Hybrid is fine, but it's expensive in maintenance, expensive to purchase.
Yeah.
So there are still a number of issues, but I still feel electric is the way. Yeah.
No, I think, and that's the way most people think as well, especially moving forward. And I'm sure, Gerd, that's something that you have to consider as well is the demand for your equipment, but also the capability in the airports that would demand the equipment as to how much of a split you go with electric or regular.
Yeah, well, we've always supported electric equipment, and for instance, with Menzies, we've worked a lot on electrifying the GSE fleet. In percentages, probably there hasn't been a lot of change in terms of electric versus diesel. What we do see, as Paul mentioned, is that we've got a lot more spread in different types of equipment where electric is now available. So yes, we always do offer an electric alternative when it's possible. I think important to look at also is the CO2. It's a tradable product, CO2 emissions. So you could put a CO2 cost against that, but you have to look at the entire cradle to grave or even cradle to cradle CO2 emission. It doesn't make sense to go full electric if your electricity is being made by burning crude oil. Like I experienced once in an airport. Then you better go for the last generation of diesel equipment, which has become very efficient as well in terms of energy usage. So that's one thing. Yes, we do believe in electric. I do agree with Paul that stuff like hydrogen, why would you spend electricity to put it into hydrogen and then use the hydrogen to go back to electricity and lose energy again. Doesn't make sense. Battery technology is moving very rapidly and getting better every day and getting cheaper every day. So yes, we do believe in that. One might have thought that with COVID, as everyone is looking even more than before on cost, that the greenification would have been stopped at some point. And it's not the case. If we look at Schiphol Airport, for instance, in Amsterdam, we look at the Spanish airport authorities, if we look at customers, handlers, airlines, everyone is still very much looking into greenification. The infrastructure, it is an issue. I do agree. We are looking, but I can't say too much about it because we signed some confidentiality agreements, but we are looking with a number of companies to also look at the infrastructure part, and that the customers that come and rent electric equipment from us, they would sell a bit of or pay a bit of a premium, and especially in pooling situations that could help, but where we could provide infrastructure, investment in infrastructure, and we're even looking into possibilities or into solutions where there's not enough electricity at hand in the airport to find solutions to that as well. So we're looking to more to come there, I would say, but yes, we are looking into that because infrastructure is an issue in some airports. Apart from that, obviously, as an asset manager, I need to look at the fleet that we have currently, and there's still a lot of diesel fleet in there, or gasoline in the US. We are also looking into greenification options, electrification options. And while doing that, then make sure you've got the latest options in terms of safety, like aircraft approach systems or aircraft anti-collision systems, that we make sure that these assets are good for another 7-8 years and put them back to our customers.
Yeah, no, 100%, 100%. So getting back to one of the earlier points about, what could airports do with regards to electric, with regards to CCTVs on stands, etc., to help with identifying any bad practices or to be used as a deterrent. And also sometimes in the design, because even curb heights and turning circles, they can also be, you sort of sometimes you go and you think, oh my goodness me, who's done this? So there's a lot of collaboration and expertise that can be done now from the practical side. Now, gents, we're coming to the end of the session, and what I like to do now, and it's just something that gives me some information back, is I like to ask people, what 3 things in your position and your level of expertise would you commit to support the community or the supply chain that you deal in? And then on the other side of the coin, what 3 things would you like to see coming from any part of the community or supply chain that would introduce more efficiencies or benefits to what you're actually trying to do yourselves? So who'd like to go first with the 3 things that they'd like to commit to?
Gert, you go first if you don't mind.
Well, yeah, I don't know if I can name 3 things from the back of my head like that, but I can commit to, and you could split it in 3 or more or less topics. But as TCR, we can absolutely commit that we want to work together with any partner in an airport. It could be the airport itself, it could be the airlines, it could be obviously the independent ground handlers. We are ready to think about any possibility that could help partners, that could help the airport community, that could help keeping cost under control, that could help greenify the environment, that could make it a safer place. So we are committed to help on any of these topics, and I would gladly invite any player in this area to reach out to us and let's set up a discussion. I think that it already brings us a long way. If you sit in every airport, you have very, very intelligent, knowledgeable people. If they sit together, more brains know a lot more than one, and just start a discussion. What can we do to help out each other? And I believe that, in all sincerity, that COVID will bring one thing, and we've seen it in a couple of airports, that people will work together more instead of seeing each other as a supplier or a customer. And we've worked together in airports with competitors of ours, or R&M shops, to make sure help out each other. If you don't have enough mechanics, then let us step in, or the other way around. That's with competitors. So I'm sure we can do it with suppliers and with customers or customers of customers or customers of customers of customers. Let's do that all together. Let's start the discussion, very open discussion, and see what we can do for each other.
Yeah, I think that's one of the positive things that has come out, that people are returning to be people and not robots or tools. And there's a genuine care, which is such a nice thing to see. So, yeah.
And then maybe on the other side, and allow me to talk a little bit for TCR here. Cost will be important next to all the other topics that we touched upon. And we first idea was to talk about total cost of ownership. Consider buying equipment, consider renting equipment. There's again not one solution for all, but if you look at comparing the different options possible on the market, whether it be financial rent with your own maintenance or buying equipment and doing your own maintenance, buying equipment and have it maintained by a third party R&M shop, or going for full operational rental, please take all of the aspects into consideration. Take depreciations and finance costs into the equation. You can keep assets for 30 years, but also look at what that maintenance cost will do. If you want to maintain a 25-year-old equipment, you can keep equipment alive basically forever, but also look at availability and at reliability of equipment. Because that 25-year-old kit, even if you maintain it to the highest standard, will not have the same availability and reliability for your operations as a new piece of equipment would have.
Can I ask you something, Gerd? Do you have like a consideration matrix where you compare the different models or the different options, and you build into that matrix or that simulator the very things that you're talking about? Because although people do things for the right reasons, there's an awful lot of common sense things that get overlooked because people weren't aware.
We do in each and every project where we, as I said, we don't have this one size fits all solution. So we first, what we always do typically with a new customer or an existing customer is, what does the customer want? What do you want to take? What do you want to get out of it? And typically, if we work on big fleet conversions where we buy the equipment from customers and we take over the workshop and we take over the mechanics and spare parts and we rent it back the next day, we always ask to have a view on the internal cost of a customer. And what we see quite often is that, yes, they have a pretty good idea of what the maintenance costs them and the building costs them. The finance cost, maybe they don't take it into consideration because they don't see it as OPEX cost. So it's a different department that does the investment in the CapEx, in the capital expenditure.
Exactly.
And another thing that people do not often think about is all of your generic cost, all of your overhead cost, because yes, you have to buy those spare parts and you have to have someone in finance paying those invoices, and take that into consideration as well. Because we do, obviously, if we calculate the rental fee, then we have to take everything into consideration. Yep. We do have a number of very knowledgeable people here that think about the future, that think about specifications, that help OEMs making products better, that look into maintenance cost and how we can do it more efficiently. Yes, these people cost money, but in the long run, they will save money for our customers. And a customer that has managed their fleet themselves, they have those people as well. And you have to take that cost into consideration as well.
Exactly. An awful lot of hidden or other people's responsibilities for costs that then people don't take into the total picture.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, great. Paul?
Yeah, I think I'm not sure if I can come up with three, but I can come up with two definites. The safety culture at the airports. I think the handlers and airlines could work a little bit closer together, sharing bulletins, sharing common incidents and how to avoid them. We do sometimes alienate ourselves from each business unit at an airport. Let's say it like that. Where we could maybe work a little bit together to be able to reduce personal injuries that can be avoided. Keeping the training up on the staff who after a number of years, you do find a lot of the incidents may happen with the older staff who've been in the business a long time, because they become a little bit complacent, and we need to keep focused on that retraining of the staff, even though they may tell you, oh, you don't have to tell me, I've been here 20 years.
That's it.
Etc. So I think we need to do a little bit more sharing there between the handlers themselves and if possible, get the airlines involved. And one of my pet, I won't say the word hate, that's not quite the right word. One of my frustrations is the continuous damage caused at the airports. I'm not talking, it's mainly minor damage, but it's a never ending story.
Yep.
We do have obviously aircraft incidents, but I'm talking about Johnny backed up and drove into the post.
Yeah.
I entered the baggage area when the barrier wasn't quite up, and so that continues. And so to try and get a grip on that is a challenge, and we've been, and Menzies have definitely been working hard on this for a number of years, but just getting people to stop doing, I suppose you could say, silly things, or pay a little bit more attention. When it's windy day, don't let go of the door so the door gets ripped off.
Yeah.
The handle like you would with your car, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
And I sometimes wonder about the incidents that do happen, because would you treat your own car that way? Probably not.
Yeah.
So it's all the small little damage and dings that get frustrating more than incidents which are much more serious, and normally there's an accountable reason why that happened with an aircraft damage, for instance, but it's all the small, never-ending, ongoing damage that continues on airports.
Yeah, and that also is a barometer or an indicator of culture and DNA, because one day the trivial many will become the critical few if it's not addressed.
Yeah.
And the thing that I never understand is why people don't take care from home to work.
Yeah. And now just come back on the point of TCO, total cost of ownership, but we are also very heavily into that. For instance, we always, Menzies, we specify with the manufacturers or suppliers of our equipment what we want on our equipment before it even arrives there. So, i.e., if we need the AHM 913 or the approach systems, the safety, anything to do with safety, it will be put on our equipment. What we don't want is that one side of the network's got it and the other one hasn't.
Yeah.
Because it hasn't. So what we do every year, we sit with our suppliers and we say, okay, these are our standard specifications. We want this on every piece of kit that you supply us. This has to be on it, and obviously you'll have local requirements, but we do try to mitigate getting equipment that is not fit. You could say fit for purpose.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you will find, before, in the older days, I'll say it like that, the finance department would buy the equipment, and it would have nothing to do with safety, what's on it. In fact, they want the bare minimum of options. It's all about, well, that one costs $10 and the next one's $10.99. Let's get the one for $10.
Yeah.
It's a case of where total cost of ownership goes totally wrong.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think everybody's got any practical experience, and whether they're involved in any form with procurement or finance, there needs to be that swing across so that you've got more practical approaches. But equally, some of the things that come from procurement are also necessary for the practical side to also understand. Absolutely,
we're not going to buy a Rolls Royce. We want to try and find the middle of the road. And that can be sometimes difficult, but if you do stick with preferred equipment, you'll end up having the same training on the same equipment.
Yeah,
you'll avoid less incidents because the staff are actually used to operating that same equipment.
Yeah, no,
and it's typically a good example of how people can work together. We are one of those suppliers that Paul works with every year. We've set up a manual together of what equipment should be and should not be, how it should be maintained, how it should be checked. And basically, we adapt our TCR specification also to what Menzies wants, because we can all benefit from each other. Paul will see a manufacturer that we maybe not have seen the last 6 months and have seen something new and a new option that could improve safety or improve efficiency. Also, having the same type of equipment all over the network obviously helps out TCR as well, because it's helping on training of mechanics. It's helping in keeping less spare parts on stock, and again will reduce our costs to the customers. So yes, we can benefit from each other.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about collaborating and caring.
Exactly.
Thank you so much. Been an absolute pleasure.
You as well, Chris.
It's always nice to see people that have been around for a while who genuinely still care so much and are still engaged and want to improve and do even more. So thanks very much for everything that you're doing, keeping everything safe as possible, and look forward to speaking to you and seeing you again, and good luck for the next 5 to 7 months, because they're going to be very challenging for everyone.
Absolutely. Same to you, Chris. Thank you very much.
My pleasure, Chris.
Yeah.
Thank you, Paul.
Bye-bye. See you
See you soon. Bye-bye.
Cheers.